This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.
Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Jackie O and you're listening to Militantly Mixed.
Yo, this is Rashani from the Single Simulcast. And when I'm not making you laugh or making up parody songs, I'm kicking back, listening to Militantly Mixed.
I would like to acknowledge that the Militantly Mixed podcast is recorded on the traditional lands of the Chumash and the Tongva people, and I wish to pay my respects to the people of those nations, both past and present. Hey y'all, welcome to Militantly Mixed, the podcast about race and identity from the mixed race perspective. I am your host, Charmaine, aka Mixed Girl Maine, the busiest mixed race, bisexual, polyamorous, atheist, comic book nerd, cat mom, mask making, comic book store co-owning, and currently dressed up as Batman podcaster in this podcasting game. This is episode 115, which is the last episode before I go on my mental health hiatus for the remainder of the month of November. But the time I am recording it, it is Halloween Day, which is my favorite day of the year. I'm dressed up as a comfy Batman. A couple years ago, I was very anti these pajama onesies as costumes, but I'm about that life right now. So I got an oversized Batman onesie. I bought a domino mask, which surprisingly, I didn't have a domino mask. How is that possible? I'm like a comic book nerd, but whatever. And I've been walking around in this thing for 2 days. It's hella comfy. It feels like walking around in a Snuggie. So I'm comfy Batman, and I'm really just enjoying the hell out of it. So happy Halloween, y'all. Because this is the last episode before I go on hiatus, I don't have too many announcemements. So we're going to be able to jump almost right into the episode. But before I do that, I just want to say that while this is a quarterly break that I do, at least once every 4 months, I take 1 month off for my mental health. Part of that has to do with how heavy some of the stories are that I receive from guests on the show, and also just the intensity of the labor that goes into producing Militantly Mixed, in particular Blurred Comics secondarily. It's not as emotionally heavy to do that show as Militantly Mixed can be. And in addition to that, I've been working for the last year to build up this business that I've now been talking about, GulfCoastCosmos.com, my online comic book store, that will eventually be a brick and mortar store when I finally move to Houston next year, summer, whatever. But it's intense. I'm busy all the time. I don't make a joke when I say the busiest mixed race, bisexual, polyamorous, thing that I do at the beginning. I have a day job, I have a part-time job, and then I run 3 small businesses that aren't making that much money right now, but I'm doing it because they're all things that I'm passionate about. And hopefully by the time I get to Houston and get my brick and mortar store and I can combine that studio space into that space, it'll cool down some of the intensity of my life. But right now, I don't know what I can give up that I wouldn't feel like is a major loss to me. And as such, it builds up. And then I need to take a break so that I don't break. That's why I'm doing the mental health hiatus. But in addition to that, as I've been talking to you about the last month, I've been dealing with vertigo. It has been really intense. I've never had vertigo for as long as I've had it this period. And after seeing my doctors a little over a week ago and been performing the exercises that they've been telling me to try to reposition the inner ear crystal thingies that kind of help with the equilibrium, it's seeming to start to work. It's not 100% better. I'm still having vertigo events, but they're not as intense and they're not as frequent as they have been, which I'm considering a win. So I'm just going to keep on that mission of doing the exercises, trying to decompress a little bit, cut down my social media time a little bit, cut down my screen time outside of work for a month and just sort of turn off and get some peace, which has been really tough to do lately because of the election cycle and all the other craziness that we've been dealing with COVID and things like that. I'm going to take a weekend trip next week. Hopefully, if I can afford it, I'm going to Yosemite. I was able to afford it, and then I had an emergency vet bill last week. So as long as I sell a couple more masks, I'll be able to keep on and do this trip, which is really important to me. I really want to do this trip. And I'll go out into nature. I'll turn off my devices, and I'll try to, center myself a little bit. But I'll still be active on social media. I'm just going to try not to be as active for the month of November. Okay, so announcements. The first one is that the Be Your Mixed Ass Self annual fundraiser t-shirt is currently available on Teespring. And the way to find that shirt is to go to militantlymixed.com and click on the Teespring button. It'll take you to the Teespring website where you can see the logo tees and the coffee mug and all that other kind of stuff. But the Be Your Mixed Ass Self fundraiser t-shirt is there as well. It will only be there until November 30th. My goal is to sell 30 shirts, and I am currently at about 7. So hopefully we can hit that goal. The t-shirts and the Patreon, that is pretty much how I make this show possible, through fan sponsorship, through your financial support. And this year we've taken a pretty big hit on the Patreon sponsorship, which I was anticipating anyway due to COVID and things like that. It started to come back for a while, and then it just took another big hit. I got to find different ways, creative ways to try to earn money to be able to keep this show going. And so it's things like those t-shirts and such that make that possible. Because I have mentioned it though, Patreon. If you would like to sponsor the show, you can sponsor as low as $1 to as high as anything you wish. And there are different reward levels depending on what you choose, ranging between $1 to $50 a month. And Patreon recently just introduced a annual sponsorship thing. So if you decide you don't want to commit to month, but you do still want to commit to the show, and you say you want to do the $5 level, then you would, you can do a $60 payment out the gate, and that would cover you for the whole year. It's a new thing that Patreon's doing. So if you would like to commit to either an annual sponsorship or a monthly sponsorship, you can go to patreon.com/militantlymixed. That link is always in the show notes, and you can sponsor the show that way. The other way that you can sponsor the show is one-time only donations, or sort of as you feel like it donations on PayPal by going to paypal.me/militantlymixed. And you can drop some coins in that tip jar as well. But yeah, the various ways that I raise money to keep this show going. And again, it's just goes back into the show. I've yet to make enough money to start paying myself for it. I don't want anybody to be worried that I'm just siphoning money off for myself. But it is the t-shirts, the stickers, the swag, things like that. And of course, the monthly sponsorship through Patreon. That's how I keep this show going and growing. And your support has been invaluable, because I would have had to end the show a while back if not for y'all's support a year ago, because that's about August, September of last year is when I started to really get fan sponsorship. So it's because of you that this show keeps going. All right. I think that's all the announcements that we really have because of the hiatus. I don't have too much to mention. So my guest this episode is Gina. She is the host of Mixed in the Six, which is a mixed race podcast based out of Toronto. And it was born out of these social events that they used to have pre-COVID, where mixed people could get together for pop-up dinners or dancing or comedy nights and things like that. And now there is a podcast related to it. Eventually, they'll be able to go back out and have their pop-up events again. During the course of this conversation, though, my guest Gina mentions Mixed Marrow, because Mixed in the Six partnered with them for an event. And I didn't want it to just blow past, because it's something that we touch on briefly, but we don't get too far into it. But Mixed Marrow is an organization that helps support mixed race donors of bone marrow to mixed race recipients. Organ donation, bone marrow donation is difficult for everybody. You can't always find a perfect match. And even if you do find a good match, the potential for rejection is still very much a possibility. The thing is that for mixed race folks, this becomes exponentially more difficult to find a donor. So Mixed Marrow is an organization that helps support finding mixed donors for mixed recipients. Like I said, we touch on it briefly during the episode because Mixed in the Six held a Mixed Marrow event, or partnered with Mixed Marrow for an event, but we didn't get too far into it. I'm going to put a link to Mixed Marrow in the show notes. It is something that I hope to eventually touch on the show in some way, shape, or form. While not specifically because of mixedness, bone marrow donation has touched my family personally, in that my play niece was born with diamond black fan anemia. She basically was perpetually dying her entire life from the day she was born. But last year, her brother donated his bone marrow to her. She was a perfect match. And a year later, so far, she is getting healthy again, or for the first time actually in her life. So I have experienced through really, really close friends that are basically family. They've been a part of my life since I was in 4th grade. And so their kids are my family too. I've watched these kids grow up, and to see an event like this happen, watching Autumn throughout her life being unhealthy, having to get transfusions every month of her life, and now finally being able to live a healthier life, it is invaluable. Compounding that with mixedness and not being able to find donors, Autumn was lucky. Her brother was a perfect match, but that is not always the case for people. So I do encourage you that if there's something that is at all of interest to you, that you do investigate it a little bit and maybe consider putting yourself up as a potential donor for another mixed cousin out in the world, because we can try to help save lives in ways that might be very difficult otherwise for mixed folks. Okay, so today's episode, my guest, like I said, is Gina. She is the host of the Mixed in the Six podcast, and really like the main or one of two main coordinators for the Mixed in the Six events. Mixed in the Six is a Toronto-based podcast. I encourage you to check out this show. I encourage you to check out all the mixed race podcasts that are out there right now. All of us that are out here doing this mixed race podcasting work come from different perspectives and have different goals and different missions within our own podcast. And there's people that may expose you to something more closer to what you need in your personal life than one of the other shows. So I really hope that Militantly Mixed is not the only mixed race podcast you listen to. I hope that we are one of the mixed race podcasts that you listen to. So please go ahead and check out Mixed in the Six. However you listen to Militantly Mixed, you will also be able to find Mixed in the Six, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, what have you. They should be available on all of the podcatchers as well. So I will be back first week of December for my birthday episode. I will still be on social media. If you would like to participate as a guest on the show, please go to militantlymixed.com, click on the Become a Guest button so that you can fill out the form to be considered as a guest for a future episode. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming our latest cousin to the Militantly Mixed family, Gina from Mixed in the Six. So my guest today is Gina from the Mixed in the Six podcast, based out of Toronto, right? Why don't you introduce yourself to everybody and let's get into it.
Yeah. Hey, everybody in the Militantly Mixed community. My name is Gina Marie, and I'm from Toronto, and I am the host of the Mixed in the Six podcast.
You were doing mixed meetups or mixed networking or something like that in Toronto before the quarantine happened, right? So why don't you talk a little bit about that and then how it transitioned into a podcast?
Absolutely. So yeah, I'll start with Mixed in the Six, then I'm going to go back a bit to my university days, or maybe I should start there. You know what? Let's start at the beginning. The beginning.
I was born.
I was born. So I was born in Barrie, Ontario, moved to Angus, Ontario, where it was really not a whole lot of mixed people, Asian people, or really any people of color. My mom's Filipino, my dad's white, Welsh and French is his background, but adopted. So he always identified as Canadian, which some people in Canada have a problem with. We're like, what does that even mean? Because it's, our whole country is built on immigration, essentially.
It's so wild that exists in Canada that it doesn't exist here. Because when people say they're American here, it's like, yeah, that means white. But if you travel and you say you're American, they're like, oh, you live in that stupid country then.
Yeah. They're like, yeah, that you're American. Yeah.
Yeah.
Canadian, it's like even Canadians are like, wait, you're not really Canadian because nobody's Canadian unless you are Indigenous. And like, that's actually something that's really, I think it's an important thing to identify too, that, we're not, unless we're Indigenous folks, we're not native to this land. So it's just a really interesting thing. So that's the thing. My dad always identified as Canadian because that's who he is. He's a Canadian guy. He's white, and my mom is Filipino. They met in high school. I grew up with basically no other mixed people except for my cousins and my siblings. Then fast forward, I went to York University, one of the biggest universities in pretty much all of Canada, and definitely one of the biggest in Toronto, of course. And I didn't even really identify as mixed. I didn't even know that was a term until a friend, sort of a new friend that I made one day while I was working on campus. His name is Philippe Koo. He and his friend Tyler, they started a mixed association called the Mixed Students Association at York. And they were like, Are you mixed? And I'm like, am I? I'm like, I think I'm Filipino, but my dad is white. Like, I just wasn't like, I always was told that I was Filipino by the kids that I grew up with, or I was Asian, Chinese, or whatever they thought was
right.
convenient for them at the time. But I always felt othered from them because I wasn't white. So I was like, I'm Filipino, but I really didn't have too much connection with the language, the culture, and what have you, growing up very much in a small, like kind of white town just outside of Toronto, Ontario. So when they asked me if I wanted to be a part of this association, I said, hell yeah. And then I became the first like president.
Oh, wow.
Not knowing what I was doing, again, just fumbling through the dark, but like I felt so super called to be a part of this group and help kind of build it from, a few members. Philippe and Tyler kind of graduated shortly after creating the group. So it's kind of like, all right, I got this, guys.
Keep the reins.
I'm going to carry on the legacy we haven't made yet, but it's going to happen. And so that's how it really started. Again, kind of organized some meetings, fumbled through the dark, was like, who likes corned beef and rice? Anybody?
I love finding out what people's hybrid foods are. Like, what do you do to mix all of your stuff?
And I think I went in there hoping to find just like other confused mixed Asian people.
Right.
And the beauty of it is that I did. I was like, yes, other people who are as confused about their ethnicity as I am, but also got to have such an appreciation for the so many beautiful people in Toronto who were from so many different cultures and backgrounds. And it was just a really enriching experience that I got to be a part of. And I was the president of our little club that could. We would have potlucks and gatherings. We'd go salsa dancing. Like, we just did everything cultural that we could think of because at first I was like, we just really connect on being mixed. So it was just a beautiful thing to be able to have conversations and to be in space with each other and to have that sense of understanding. And then in terms of our actual events, we just did social events and had like good times, and we would have some discussion groups and things like that as well. I showed like a documentary that someone who was mixed black and white, who I went to high school with, we like showed her documentary that she made, like those types of things. And then when I graduated, it continued on for a few years. But then it's no longer happening at York University, but we had a good run. But I stayed friends with my mix, like we called it MSA, our loving. We stayed friends with all of the MSA peeps over the years, and we're involved in a few other like projects, photo projects, that kind of thing. But I felt like a real longing to get people back together.
Right.
We would have some casual events here and there, just like the MSA crew, or like we called them the MSA core, the people who started the group with us.
Nice.
Like, shout out to Rocky and Jenny, Christina, but we hadn't, people kind of went their separate ways, and MSA was no longer really going because none of us were at York anymore. And then in 2016, I had to have been 2016. Yeah. I was off work because I was in a very bad car accident, and I was just hanging out, thinking of like, ways to occupy my time. So I decided to go on Tinder and meet people. And I matched with my now friend, Han. Like, we went for coffee. We ended up we talked about like psychology books and being mixed, but we actually connected, I think primarily because I was like, are you mixed Asian? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, I was like, I was a part of a club at York University called the Mixed Students Association. He's like, they did not have one of those at my university. So we were like,
they didn't have one when I was in school.
Exactly. And now I follow like all of them, like a lot of them are around in the States, which is amazing. And so we connected on that. And Han is an amazing chef. I, former president of Mixed Students Association at York and like lover of creating events. We decided that let's be friends. let's remain friends. And then we hosted an event. We're like, let's do like a dinner, like a pop-up dinner. And I think originally we called it Mixed in the City. Just Mixed in the City. It turned into Mixed in the City.
We do what we got. We got to find how to make it cute, right?
but people loved it. And we posted, we're doing mixed like pop-up for mixed people. I can't remember the wordage, but we sold out in like a day.
Awesome.
It was just a small little space that we had in downtown Toronto. Super cute kind of loft space that they have concerts in, like little house concerts and dinners. Okay. So we hosted that, and it was so much fun. It was like walking into a room with long lost family. That's what it felt like. And everybody was so like lit up afterwards. Most of these people I had never met before, had never met each other. I obviously knew a lot of the people who came because either from MSA or whatever. But I remember we went to a bar afterwards across the street, and we were all like doing a big group hug, and people are like looking at us because we all in a way looked the same.
Vaguely the similar, even if you're different races. Yep. Feels good.
Which is funny because I think I roll my eyes now when I think about people like, thinking that we look alike just because we're mixed. But I'll hopefully get to a funny story about that in a moment. But it was just something we had to follow. So we just kept on finding different venues to do these pop-up dinners. And of course we had food, and we would invite people from the community who are performers and singers to share their music and to share their songs. People who were like photographers took like some photos of people, and like they'd have like really cool portraits. So we would post portraits, and people would share stories on our social media about being mixed or, their experience with family, that kind of thing. And then eventually it blossomed into like a food, music, dance party, philanthropy, like community building, like love fest. One of our first bigger events that we did, I forgot, what was it? Peter Pan Bistro? Is that what it was called? It was on Queen Street. Again, in downtown Toronto. We had a bone marrow donor drive for people to sign up if they're willing to be a bone marrow donor. And we matched, we linked up with a group called Match for Ari. And it's this young guy, Ari, and his parents, who are like really raising a lot of awareness around blood donation and bone marrow donation, because Ari has aplastic anemia, and like sort of the best chance for a cure for his condition is a bone marrow donor. And you might already be aware of this, but for people who are mixed, finding a bone marrow donor is very, very hard. It's like 0.001%. And so it was amazing to marry like our fun social event with this like advocacy cause that really affected like everybody in the room, whether you knew it or not. And then, empowering people like, we're not just here to have a good time too. We actually can make a real big difference.
Help the community. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was amazing with how many of us didn't actually know that was a thing. Like I did learn about the bone marrow, the need for more mixed race donors in university. That was something I kind of got a little bit involved with, but I really wanted to do more. Unfortunately, we were able to do that with Mix in the Six. And a big part of it was one of our outings was going to see this movie, Mix Match, by Jeff Chibba Stearns. And I used to email with him. Yes, I've Zoomed with him. I had lunch with him once.
Nice.
Yeah. And Athena, who is also a part of the film as well, who I think it's, I can't remember.
What's it called? Mixed marrow.
Yeah, amazing advocacy. Also raising awareness for more mixed people to become bone marrow donors. So I remember we watched that film, and all of us were just like totally moved. And I've watched it a couple times now, and I cry every time because it's, you see families that look really similar to yours, and you realize that community, again, it's such a beautiful thing to connect on shared experiences, make friends, ask those questions and be seen. And then it's just like a whole other level when you can help someone. So that was really an amazing experience that came out of Mix in the Six. We also did some blood donor drive as well and kind of shared people's stories and kind of helped raise awareness from that. But yeah, we and I could go on. We've done a bunch of stuff. We did 2 really awesome comedy shows that were those were my favorite. We had a night of mixed race comics, 1.0 and 2.0. We had two events and they were very popular and sold out. And I remember being so nervous every time we do one of these shows because I was like, okay, we're doing comedy
there. There's just going to be 3 of us. Yeah,
I know. I'm like, are people going to find it fun? Like we had really amazing comedians on the show, but it was always like, and we're so excited to have a platform for mixed race comics because that wasn't actually something we'd seen. Like we had been doing like mixed events, bringing mixed people together, but the comedy was a little new. And I love comedy. Comedy to me is like therapy. Like
it's legit why I stay in LA.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, there's lots of great comics there. Like when I'm like depressed and in a bad space, I've gone to comedy shows and I've laughed and cried and been like, oh, right. I feel better. Like this was like,
laughter is like medicine or something.
Yeah, I know, right? I think I've heard that quote before. And these shows, of course, me so nervous going into them, they were. Can I swear? I was about to say,
we're grown.
Okay, yeah. I'm like, they're fucking hilarious.
Yeah.
So good. And it was such an awesome experience to be in a room where the comic was like the people in the audience.
Yeah.
And they're saying jokes that like they landed so well. And I'm said, I always have such fond memories from that. We had a great lineup. I've actually interviewed Jen Sacato, who's going to be on the season 2 of Mix in the Six podcast, who helped curate that show. She was a huge part of it, and she's an amazing comic. And she was the host. And I've also interviewed Nick Reynoldson, who's so funny. He's Guyanese and British, and just like great people. So we did a lot of really cool stuff. And then I've obviously COVID hit more recently, but Han opened a restaurant. I have been I work in mental health and was kind of doing more like of my career development. So we had to put some things on pause because it was really just him and I putting it together. And it was a lot of work and I'm sure you can appreciate, the work that you put into a podcast and something that comes from the heart. It's not always it's definitely not paying our bills.
No, it's not.
In fact, I think we more lost money from doing these
definitely
events.
Have skipped a bill or two to try to keep the show going.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember when we first started this, I wasn't actually working. So I had a lot more time to put into it.
Right.
Like Han was like our, sugar daddy. He was like funding everything.
Shout out to Han for all his work.
It's like, I was like, so can you front the money for the logo? We had a logo contest and stuff like that. And
okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
But it was a really great collaboration, but also something that took a lot of time and energy. And we kind of needed to regroup. And I think neither one of us wanted to let go of it completely because it was something that brought so many people together. And for me it's always about those even those little stories. I remember some of the people who came to our first event after we were featured in the Toronto Star. One of our fam, Erin Kobayashi, who's a great writer, she wrote a piece about us in the Toronto Star. And after that, our next event was so big.
Oh, nice.
It was a lot of fun. But what was so beautiful about this event too was that there was a bunch of people that came by themselves. They traveled across the city, took 3 different buses.
Just for an opportunity
because they read it and they were like, oh, that's a space for
this thing. Yeah.
I'm that's the kind of stuff that makes me weep. I still feel emotional about it.
It's what makes it so it's what makes it both a passion thing for you, but also you end up feeling a responsibility to keep it going because if no one else is doing it or not as many people are doing it, or you live in Toronto and I live in LA, where are people going to find it close by? Yeah, it does. It's I swear there's so many times where I end the recording and then I just weep afterwards because that people need this, representation or connection or whatever. So that's amazing. It sounds like, well, first of all, I'm hella jealous. I feel very behind because I'm just doing the podcasting. Well, not just, I got like 14 different businesses, but
you're doing
but like,
a lot.
That's what I would love to do, events like that and hold physical space for people as well. Was it primarily the quarantine that turned it into a podcast, or was podcast in the horizon and quarantine helped it happen?
Well, it was probably far too long that we hadn't done much. And like, I know, like, I was like, we need to like post like an announcement to say like what we've been up to. And which was like, we haven't been doing much Mix and Sick stuff because we've just been so busy and like we're real humans.
Right.
And but before quarantine, I had been talking to a few people who were looking to collaborate, and I know like Han had to put his focus and intention to the restaurant obviously. And then there was some other folks who like were meeting to do like maybe like another comedy show, like but a smaller one, some like smaller like music events, that kind of thing. But then COVID hit. And so we were like, okay, no in-person events, but like things were just starting to kind of take shape, but we hadn't made any big events or dates. I think we were going to have actually Cheyenne Sapphire, who was this second guest on the first season.
I think I listened to that episode. That name is familiar.
She's so badass. We were like hoping to do like a concert of some kind because she's a performer. But again, that didn't happen because of COVID. So I kind of sat there and I'm like, okay, what do I do? And it just and I know that I knew of other podcasts, but I'm going to be honest, I hadn't been much of a podcast consumer, but I loved the media. Like I love the medium. I love being able to talk to people because that was always my thing with the actual events, is that I would just love being like, hey, how are you? Where are you? Like, where are you from? Of course, the question.
It's different. It hits different when we ask.
You know what I mean? But I would be like, tell me about your story. How did you hear about us? Like, that was always my favorite part, was actually connecting one-on-one with people. In addition to like creating and producing an event, but like the heart was hearing people's stories and hearing how they connected with other people in the space or how they felt about being mixed after coming to the event, that kind of thing. Like it was just always super cool. And those conversations were really valuable and heartening for me. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do a podcast. Let's just do it. And I had my shitty headphones and I didn't even know how to record on gallery view. This is the real deal, guys. I'm just fumbling through the dark, but it was so great because I started with one of my friends, Bobby Del Rio, who's an actor and a director. He's done a lot of really cool things in film here in Toronto, and has a great play, Professionally Ethnic, that I think might be turned into a TV show at some point. I got to check in with him, but he was our first guest and it was great because he's mad cool and we were good vibes and we just had a good conversation and it was lively and fun. And we also talked about how quarantine was affecting us, and then put it on SoundCloud and people listened to it. And I was like, all right, well,
it's weird when people start listening. Like I remember in the beginning, cause same thing. I was a podcast consumer, but I was listening to true crime and comedy. Like seriously, if someone looks at my phone, if something ever happens to me, it's going to be very confusing because all of my things are true crime and comedy and mixed stuff or black stuff. Like it's pretty much everything, or comic books.
She likes to laugh, but also likes to learn about serial killers.
Yeah, it's like, why is she so obsessed with serial killers? So I was thinking, there's not much about, like, I was looking for mixed things. There really wasn't any active at the time. There was some dead podcasts, short runs or just gave up, whatever it was. And I was like, well, it's a free medium. I'll make it happen. Yeah. And when I say free, I mean, technically, yes, can be done for free, but then the expense, then it was just like, oh, I need my microphone to sound better because I just have my headphones. Oh, I need this, I need that. And next thing I know, I've built a job that I didn't realize I was doing. But it's also been the thing that got me out of depression for a really big time, when I was in a real big bout of depression, major depression, and the connection to people, other mixed people. I'm really excited about your events, even though I'm a little bit too far away to ever go to one. And there's a whole global pandemic, but that was next step. The one thing that I was wanting to do one day is to be able to provide things like that. So I'm really excited. I do know the reason because I have listened to the show, but can you tell the audience that may not know why it's called Mix in the Six?
Well, Mix in the Six is called Mix in the Six because Toronto, as we lovingly call it these days, we call it the Six, and it represents like the 6 municipalities that are in. Or like if we were in New York, the boroughs.
Right.
we don't use those cool terms. It's municipalities.
Well, it's different all over the states.
Yeah,
like in California,
exactly.
We don't do that at all. You live in a city and that's it, or a town. But if you live in the South, you're in wards.
Yes,
different wards.
Yeah.
And then the boroughs in New York. So yeah, the 6 municipalities that works too. That's so Canadian, by the way.
Yeah, I know. So like formal sounding. And then first, like I feel like I'm like, should I name them all? And I'm like, because I've done it before, but then I kind of forget, so I won't. But I know them. Represent the 6.
Nice.
And that's what it's called. And actually, I should give credit. Kind of partial credit to Matthew King, who had said encourage using Mixed in the Six as the name. Although it was kind of something that I had thought about, but it was like Mix in the City. We didn't want to use the 6 right away because we didn't want Drake to come after us. Although Drake is mixed, so you should come through.
Right, support the tribe.
He coined the term, but then afterwards we're like, no, we're going with Mix in the Six.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. Sounds good.
So it is great that you're doing what you're doing. And I know just from talking to you a little bit, and hearing it from your show too, that like you feel this something like what I feel of this thing of it's kind of for you, but it becomes for others because you realize what was missing for you is missing for them too. And if you have the capacity, you can do this work and it feels good and things. You were in Richard's doc, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
So for folks who saw our first live stream in Militantly Mixed in July, we did Decenter. It was mixed Black artists for Black lives. And it was myself, Allison Hart, Teresa Stovall, Sonia Smith-King, and Richard B. Pierre, who is the documentarian who did What Are You? And you were in that doc.
I was.
How'd you get in that doc?
Really through Mix in the Six. So Richard came to we had a holiday karaoke jam.
Nice.
Talk about like doing things for me. I love karaoke.
Right? I know.
I was like, we're doing a karaoke, and everybody loved it. It was
Food
so much fun.
Karaoke.
Yeah, exactly.
Check.
Yeah. Also, like the Filipino in me is about the karaoke. Right. We had a karaoke event and Richard came and it was great. And he was saying he hadn't made the film yet, of course. That was the day that we met. But he was saying, I'm going to make this film. I wanted to do it for a while. And he's like, I haven't started, but I remember him saying like, this film is going to be made. And I'm like, it is going to be made. Let me know how I can help. And then I was like, maybe I'll be in it. But like, but I was also like, not like I was more like, how can we like support you in moving it forward?
Use the community, right?
Yeah. Which, we posted and kind of helped fundraise, but like Richard like did such an amazing job. But like, I still remember from the beginning when I think it was like Indiegogo and like just sharing and like really just putting it out there for the cast and really sharing the vision that he had for the film, which I'm obviously extremely connected with, and many people from the community did, because there was a number of people from the like Mix in the Six community who were in the film, myself included. Like I sent in my my little intro thing, and I was able to be a part of it.
And it was also very like mixed Canadian centric in a way. Well, obviously, like that's the people that are around. But you felt as an American watching it, you could feel the Canadian aspect of the mixedness that was being displayed. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think there were some people who were from the States as well, or had grown up, because I think also Richard has grown up part of his life in the States as well. But yeah, there was definitely a lot of the cast were from Canada, which is cool, because I as far as I know, I didn't know of any mixed race documentaries that were highlighting folks from Canada. So that was cool. yeah, I got to be a part of it. And it was an interesting thing because I've talked about this with Sarah Chasm, who was one of our guests in the first season, who was also in the film, is that I sort of did a bit of I would call like a bell curve with my mixed identity. I started like, or maybe it was another kind of curve, but like I grew up, I didn't even know that I was different than anyone else. I just thought I was like a human being or like a white person, essentially, like everyone else around me, until I went to school. Then I was Asian. And then when I went to university, high school, university, until mixed in the six, I was like just identified as being Filipino and Asian, and then realizing that I had really very little access to what it was like to be Filipino. Like Filipino people often are like, you're not Filipino. Like you weren't born here. You don't speak the language. Like you don't look it. And then I was like, I don't think I'm allowed to even claim being Filipino at all. And so I kind of went through this thing where I was like, I'm just mixed and I just have to be happy about it. And that's where it kind of lands. But there's a bunch of like deeper stuff that I hadn't really fully reflected on. And by the time I got to the film, I was a little bit like, everything's great. Mixed people are awesome. But what was cool
everybody accepts us.
But what was actually great is like Richard's questions, like we're kind of getting into like the more of like the history, like more of the things that I encountered over the years, which I was like, oh, I can have a space to actually go there. So at first it took me a little bit of time during the interviews when throughout the film to like kind of get into like the space where I could talk about like some of the microaggressions and like the subtle racism that I've experienced, and also just like how that affected me growing up as a child, because that definitely impacted the way like my sense of self-worth and my sense of self, and I talk about it on the podcast quite a bit, like over for the first season, particularly because I'm a mental health professional. And I like talking about, how all of our experiences affect our mental health. So I think I really thank being in the film that kind of helped me open myself up to doing some of the deeper reflection, not always just like kind of bypass some of the harder stuff by just being like a part of community and like being all united, because, the history of like mixed people in our lifetime, like in our lifetime and before us, has not been rainbows and like, ooh, we're really like people thinking like, oh, mixed race people are like immune to, I don't know, like other disorder. Like it's just, or like we're all really good looking and blah, blah, blah. Like it's like it's like there's so, like I don't even, all
the things like it's
other podcasts. Like there's a whole, like there's lots of really great, accounts now on Instagram that are like kind of telling more of the story about mixed race people in different countries and different cultures. And that was something that kind of opened up for me. And I'm kind of going on a whole other direction, but I that was something that I remember I took away from being in the film, was that I felt like there's actually more work for me to do on reflecting on my own mixed race experience. And then
the work at all, like the association that you created and all this kind of stuff, like that ends up being a thing where it is constantly changing you, because you get introduced to somebody who tells something about them and you're like, oh, that's a little bit me too. And now you got to go down that rabbit hole of your own identity until it comes back. And short of a trigger, like if you're just living your life, if those guys didn't come up to you in college and say, hey, are you mixed? You might have gone further before you dealt with it. Like it's these different steps throughout our lives that do this. And I think your show, the events, my show, all of these mixed race things that are out there now, when they stumble on it, they're like, oh yeah. Like if it's not therapy and something you says makes the therapist goes, oh, is this because your parents have different, skin tones? Or something like that? Unless it's something like that, you're just going because you don't know anything different. It takes this for you to get into it. So your identity, whatever it is now, is probably not going to be what it is 2 months from now, even. No, actually that's,
thank you. That's like a really beautiful way of like kind of putting all those things together and describing like, the lifelong journey of like piecing together, like what is my identity and what is my identity today and what is going to be in the future, because it is always changing. The way that I speak about it has changed. And I think it's very similar to how I identified in the film when, we were asked like, what are you? How do you identify? And before I would say I would say I was Filipino. Other times I would be like, I'm Canadian, but my mom's Filipino. Now I'm like, I'm mixed Filipino Canadian. That's what I am, you know? And I say that I'm mixed first because that's actually what's like, that really speaks to my
more
heart.
core. Right. Yeah, I agree.
That I'm not like not enough Filipino or like not totally white. I'm mixed, and that's beautiful. And that's where it starts. And that's where it goes. And
there was something you said at the beginning where you said, I'm Filipino, but I have a white dad. And I think that's what you said to the guys in college, right? And like that sentence to me was, I could put that on a t-shirt, like for pretty much for any of us, like fill in the blank. I'm this, but I have a parent that doesn't look like me. I think that was so like, I don't know how to say what I am. Yeah. I'm Filipino, but I have a black dad or a white dad. Yeah. It was one of those, it was so like, I really felt that moment. Cause I know what it's like of being like, but my dad's black, cause people trying to understand why I identify as black when I look like I do. I'm like, well, my dad's black. Well, what about your mom? Well, she's Japanese, but like, I didn't grow up in Japan, and I didn't grow up like you with the Filipino thing. Like, you're not Filipino the way Filipinos from Philippines are.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's tough.
It is. Although, and I've spoken about this before, when I went to the Philippines in 2018 for 6 weeks, it was magical. I felt so great because I just told people, like, I would like talk to the trike drivers, people driving me around everywhere. They're so amazing. They were like, I would say that my mom's from Isabella. And I swear every single, maybe except for one crabby guy, we're like, oh, you're Filipina. And like, it's like a big, like, spiritual hug, it was amazing. And I was like, oh, okay. You know what? I am also Filipino, and I can say that if I want to, because my mom's from there. And
did
when
you have much access to like culture and food and things like that? Is that why you feel people have isolated you from your Filipino-ness?
So interesting. When I was growing up, when I was with my family on my mom's side, it was like all, I didn't always know like the names of all the dishes, but like we were like, having the quintessential, like big family Filipino jam with like the food and like the cousins that you are not actually related to, but they're all there. Right. I mean? And like my titas and my uncles like speaking Tagalog and Ilocano. So it was like, it was there in a way, but I think what kind of furthered me away from feeling like I was Filipino was when I when I was like a little bit older, like an adult and was in university and stuff, when I would say I was Filipino and I was around people who either were Filipino or like knew other Filipinos or were like not mixed and didn't get it. They're like, they'd look at you and you're like, but you're not though. Like, so it was like that kind of like got me. Yeah. Right? Like, am I doing something wrong by saying that I'm Filipino, but I'm not born there? And I felt like I was like, why am I carrying that around? But I carried it around for a while.
Yeah, that's interesting because there's been questions that have popped up over the years doing the show of like, am I appropriating my own culture just because I didn't have as much access to it as other people that are either mixed the same way or are fully what that is. Man, that is a struggle that we all deal with, is like, what's the level of permission we have to access the cultures that we come from? That's a big thing. And it makes sense that you would deal with what you were dealing with, not knowing if you get to claim it.
It's great. I believe it was Sarah, her name's Sarah, who was also in What Are You in Richard's film. She's talking about like, I can't remember the exact quote. It's great. It's like, if I feel like I was appropriating my own culture, and that's something that only a mixed person can think. And I'm like, oh my gosh. It's like, I want to put that on a t-shirt because I felt it so many times. I think Sarah is mixed, like Asian and European. Yeah. I think she was talking about using chopsticks.
Oh, okay. That's funny. Using chopsticks, if that's appropriating your own culture. I don't know. That gave me a little. Yeah,
I know. You're like, I know. You think go through like you go through like your mental like memory of all these moments where you're like, yeah, it's like an interesting thing that really, I feel like only like mixed people or maybe sometimes folks who were maybe born in North America, but have some like ties to other countries where they feel very like Canadian or American. But, you know, we have these like ancestral lines to these other cultures that are part of us as well. Like it's still, it's in us. It is part of who we are.
Right.
And I think that's been like, since going to the Philippines and then having more conversations on the podcast and with other mixed people in the community at large, is really just getting an opportunity to just reclaim who we are outside of what society or like the communities that we grew up in told us we are. And that is really liberating. It's so liberating.
It is. And honestly, it's kind of the addictive part of doing the kind of stuff that you and I are into, right? Is just like every time you either get a person that has slightly similar overlap to what you dealt with, or just comes from totally different cultures, but there's something similar between you. That's like a little drug hit, you know, where you're just like, I need more of that. Like I need more of those stories. And like you said earlier, you know, mixed people, we didn't have like a book to turn to see mixed narratives. We didn't have TV shows very often. You might see an occasional mixed character where the mixedness didn't seem to come up the way you saw in your own life. And you're just like, well, I guess there's something weird about me. It's always that it's wrong in you, that you're the different one or something. And so what we're creating in our separate entities is a documented mixed narrative for people in the future and currently to look for and see themselves in, whether they're listening to an episode of yours on my show, specifically because they're also Filipino and white Canadian and they want to have a story similar to them and they start with your episode, or they happen to, well, I'll try out another episode and it's a Black and Asian person. And it's like, oh, that's a slightly similar but different experience to mine, things like that. I think it's important what we're doing. I think it's important for ourselves, our own, understanding of who we are. And I think our mental health comes a big play in it. I mean, I talk about that myself all the time is not being able to embrace who I was fully in every space was preventing growth. It was preventing comfort for me. And, no wonder I'm depressed. I'm being constantly told I'm wrong. There's something different about me. And until I was able to break free from that, I wasn't able to deal with some of those issues. And I think the work we're doing is also going to help other people who feel like they don't have permission to be their full mixed ass selves or to eat with chopsticks if you're mixed Asian. Whatever it is.
T-shirts.
You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I think it's great and important. And I'm so glad that you're doing what you're doing for the Toronto area. And if I get myself up there, if COVID ever allows us to travel again, I hope that I time it in such a way that is also a mixed in the six.
Sometime in the future. I know we got to get together with John Corbin too.
Right. We got a couple Canadians up there that we could get together with, and it would be great. We are coming a little bit close to the end though. Why? So I like to ask all of my guests, I mean, even though this one we didn't really deal with it, but sometimes we do deal with trauma and difficulties about our mixedness and things. I would like to end on a positive note. What do you love most about being a mixed person?
I love this question. And I know I've asked people this, and here I am with like, where do I start? I mean, what I love most about being a mixed person, to be honest, but it's going to sound so like, which is very basic, is honestly just being able to pave our own path together with other mixed people. Right. Like, I think it's really great that I have connections to different cultures, and maybe you can't put me in a box. I really think for me in my lifetime, being a part of these community projects, doing the podcast, meeting you, doing Mix in the Six, doing MSA, it's been such a huge part of my identity because it came from a core place of hurt and like a lack of belonging and isolation, but it's turned into like, I'm just getting emotional. It's turned into like something that's a part of who I am and part of what the contribution that I'm making on the, on others and in the community. Not to be like, oh yay, like, our events change lives or podcasts change lives, but like, I think
it does though.
Yeah, you totally get it. It's becomes something like this heart-driven project, and it's from, all from being mixed. And to me, that is the best part about being mixed, is getting to meet other people, share stories, and create this thing that we needed. And here we are.
I love that. I don't think that's a basic answer at all. It's hard to come to terms with this. I mean, so you've been doing your events for over 4 years now or whatever. So I'm sure but it's hard to be the one that takes that on. Like, yes, I did this thing. Definitely get that. That being said, the amount of emails and messages I've received, I'm sure you've also received them, if people have sold out your events as much as they have, that making that space available to somebody is the difference between a really good mixed day and a really bad mixed day, I think, for some folks. And while it is hard to take those thank yous or those compliments or whatever, I mean, I'm Japanese British. Make me uncomfortable by telling me I've done a good job. Absolutely. Those are definitely stereotypes that exist for a reason. I am very uncomfortable with it. I'm getting better because I know that it means something to people. And I think if we can spread that as far as we can spread it and overlap with each other, to make people feel that there's more than just one space for them. I think that is the best thing that we can be doing. And I'm so glad that you're doing the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You inspire me so much. And I'm going to take this moment to acknowledge you for all of the work that you do and for bringing all of us up, right? There's a seat at the table for all of us. And I think that's so important. And our stories are important and you're important. And I'm really thankful and grateful to have gotten a chance to chat with you.
Yeah, me too. Why don't you tell everybody how to find you, Mix in the Six, like all the things?
Yeah. So you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you can find us on Anchor, and then you can listen to us wherever you like. But yeah, Spotify and Apple Podcasts mainly. You can also follow us on Instagram at Mixed in the Six, spelt SIX, not with a 6, IX. So SIX. You can also follow us on Facebook and just Mix in the Six. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm Gina Daring Greatly. I also post a lot of different things around like my journey as well, being mixed and sharing a lot of stuff around the What Are You film and what other cool people that are mixed in Toronto are doing. So that's our space. And if you want to check us out, our new season is coming out early November, probably November 5th, maybe November 6th, but stay tuned. Now that I said it, it's coming out November.
It has to happen now. It's like everybody's going to hear about it. Yeah. So Militantly Mixed listeners, if you are from Toronto or not from Toronto, go to and check out Mix in the Six 2 and get your life with other stories that, I mean, you're just talking to people too. Like that's what I'm doing. We're just having conversations, and to get a chance to hear two mixed people get to talk about mixedness in a full, safe and comfortable environment is, it's certainly how I get my life, or I wouldn't do this. I'm sure you're getting it too. So I'm really glad to have that space. So support Mixed in the Six.
It's like my oxygen, it helps. It really
so
just helps
weird.
Breathe life into breathe life into my life. It's other stories. So
right. No, I agree. I stole this term from Allison Hart, who was in the Decenter thing that we did with Richard. She calls it medicine, like to do the work within mixes. She wrote a book called Mostly White, which is about a Black, Indigenous and white 4 generations of mixed women of those ethnicities, and she called doing the work her medicine, and I've stolen it, and pretty much everything I do on the show I stole from somebody else too. I always give them credit, but Allison called it medicine, and I agree with that. I think doing this work it heals me, and it gives me a pathway towards helping other people, which is also something that is very important to me. So it's good. It feels so good. It breathes life into your life.
Yes, like exactly. I know, the medicine, the healing, the community, the connection, the belonging, all of those things, that again kind of make me just want to cry because it's beautiful and it's so necessary. And again, I'm really glad that we're a tribe. High five from.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Militantly Mixed is a ManeHustle Media podcast, produced and hosted by me, Charmaine Fury.
Music is by David Bogan the One. You can follow us on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Militantly Mixed. If you'd like to become a sponsor of Militantly Mixed, please go to patreon.com/militantlymixed for monthly sponsorship or paypal.me/militantlymixed for a one-time only donation. And if you like what you hear on Militantly Mixed, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to be your mixed-ass self.
ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.